Tots, Maywe, in Mlautiwa, Toxiwas, Tots, Katia, Hanyuwa, Kaoikalo. Thank you all so much for being here on day 7 of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Conference. It is such a pleasure to have you, and I have a lot of gratitude that you keep coming back to join us. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are in the ancestral territory of the Burns Paiute tribe, the Warm Springs tribe, the Fort McDermott, Paiute, and Shoshone tribes, and the Shoshone Paiute tribes of Idaho, and the Shoshone Bannock tribe of Idaho. We are also Idaho built and established on the ancestral territory of the Coeur d'Alene tribe, the Kootenai tribe, and the Nez Perce tribe of Idaho. Thank you all. I also encourage you to use a link that we've been posting in our chat intermittently about whose land you occupy. It is a way to engage with the Indigenous folks of your community. It is a way to have a deeper understanding with the land itself. And that is a part of addressing sovereignty and asserting sovereignty for Indigenous people. Our sovereignty is couched in land and in language. So I encourage you, if you are non-native, to really engage in that learning. And for those of you who are Indigenous, if you are a guest somewhere, I am Nimipu, but a guest on Niwa and Numu land. So understanding like how these folks and relatives identify with the land is an important part of building community and engaging. Our sponsors today for the event are the Idaho Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. We are also co-sponsored by the Idaho Council on Domestic Violence and Victim Assistance, and we have received some funding and support from the United States Department of Justice. Thank you all. I'm going to get us started again for the second session of our Day 7 MMIP conference presentations. I hope that you took advantage of the time and spaciousness on your break to reset yourselves, drink some water, ground yourselves back into the space. We are going to move into Tyesha Wood's presentation. Again, Tyesha is from the Amber Alert in Indian Country project coordinator. And so the conversation now will move into practical application training, historical lens for this work, and then how we can all incorporate it into our work moving forward. Again, if you have questions during Tyesha's presentation, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen or chat them to us. I will definitely keep an eye on those things, and we'll use that to close out our session today. Go ahead, Tyesha. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us allow the time to do so. My name is Tyesha Wood. Yat Eben, she a Tyesha Wood. I am a member of my class. Those of you that are in the audience that are related to me, hello, thank you. I hope everyone is being safe. I am going to have a camera and I don't want to distract from it. So I will begin. Okay. I think everybody can see that, right?
We can see it. Thank you. And okay. I think you're breaking up just a little bit. Me also.
Let me put my mic closer. Is that better?
You're loud enough and clear. It's just, I think virtually you're breaking up via the internet. So, well, I will, if it's too bad, I might pause you, but otherwise I think that we'll give it a try and it should be okay.
Okay, feel free to jump in at any time, and I'm sorry about that connection. Funny story before I begin. As I mentioned, I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I do currently reside in the Saltwater Indian community, Scottsdale area. So I live on the reservation, and being I live here, we get permits and have been sightings of groundhog, and we believe they're fiber optics in the ground. So we had been losing service now and then, but the darn groundhogs are trying to disrupt progress here. Anyway, I just thought I did that. As I mentioned, I am a project coordinator for the Act, which is a program under the National Criminal Justice Training Center. And we are funded by a grant through the Department of Justice. Our program is solely responsible for the Amber Alert Indian Country implementation to the states and the tribes in the country. And that's what our primary job is. You would think we would have a large organization for entry. There's over 550, 74 federal attorneys. There's like 3 of us that work entirely on this program. It's myself and Chelsea Sesawa and Melissa Blazing. And yes. Forgive me, I'm working on PowerPoint. I should have had you guys control me.
I'm going to interrupt you really quick. I'm so sorry to do this. We are, because the tech issue is so, so you're breaking up for all of us. I thought it was just me. Is
Okay.
it possible to have you call in your audio? So
yes.
Can we try that? So we'll give that just a minute while you do that. And for the rest of you, thank you again, patience. We've made it most of the month without any tech issues. So I'm grateful that you all are patient with us while we navigate this. Do you have the number? Do you see the number pop up in the chat for you, Tyesha?
Let me get to that.
Okay. I'm also going to tell a funny story that's very similar to the groundhog story. I went home to visit my family on the res. I'm from the Nimipu Reservation, the Nez Perce Reservation at the base of the panhandle of Idaho.
Welcome to Zoom.
And
enter your meeting ID.
During that time, I had to work even though I was visiting home. So ultimately what happened, the internet wasn't working. And my mom had called the tribe for help. And they went to check it out at the house. They said, oh, well, there's a bunch of hay bales piled in front of the repeater, which I thought was really entertaining. Like that's the most country thing ever, that when you pile hay in front of the internet repeater, you evidently don't have Wi-Fi anymore in your home. So that was the same, like the res life is the best life, where you've got groundhogs preventing fiber optic Wi-Fi, and then you've got hay bales during the harvest season getting in the way of actually accessing it. So that's pretty entertaining to me. All right, so tech team, where are we at with phones and sound?
Can you guys hear me?
We absolutely can hear you.
Okay, I'm gonna mute my computer. Let's try this again. Take 2. everyone.
Take two. Perfect. Thank you so much. Loud and clear now.
Okay. And now I'm stuck on the screen. I don't know how to go forward. That's okay. So what we are going to talk about is the Ashlynne Mike AMBER Alert Indian Country Act, and we are very grateful that we're able to work with Pamela Foster on our initiative. And as she tells her story, each time I hear it, I still get, the chills and the lump in my throat, and my heart strings are pulled because of what happened with Ashlynne, but not so much just with Ashlynne, but how we each are impacted by this story, because we have loved ones that we want to protect. And it goes from our own children, but our relatives, our parents, our brothers and sisters. It may not be blood relation, but we are a community in Indian country. So I may not know, those of you may not personally know Ashlynne. I mean, you still feel for her story, you still feel for Pamela's family, and that's the way we are in Indian country. And because of that significance in our relations and our kinship, we realize, or the National Criminal Justice Training Center realized, that the AMBER Alert itself not only failed to extend into tribal communities, but actually it failed to extend and educate tribes about the AMBER Alert. And we are all on a different level in terms of education. I mean, what works for LA does not work for the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. What works for Seattle, Washington does not work for the community in Rosebud, or for the tribes in Idaho. So this is what our organization is about. It's about educating the tribes, the communities, and the states about the tribes within their state. So 2 years later, it took less than 2 years for the law to be implemented and signed by the president. And what it allows us to do now is to teach and reach out to communities, in tribal communities specifically, about their opportunities, and not so much with just AMBER Alert, but educating the community. And we don't want to just talk to the police department or the fire department or to tribal leaders. We respect all of those entities in itself, but our education extends into the communities. We want children to know what we are doing to protect them. We want tribal elders to know what we are doing to try to protect them. As you know, in tribal communities, a lot of the our grandparents, sometimes we prefer to live with our children, prefer to live with their grandparents, or sometimes grandparents have custody of our children, and they need to understand, who to call and, what measures will be taken within communities. So that's what our program is about. We need to educate on all platforms within tribal communities. When the law was passed in 2018, what it allowed us to do is to kind of streamline. I want to use that word very loosely, but we had to first find out what the problems were in Indian country. And we did two things for this. We conducted a survey with tribal communities, and we conducted a survey with AMBER Alert programs, with the coordinators. Now, a little bit more about AMBER Alert and what it involves. Each state has a AMBER Alert state coordinator. That coordinator only works within the AMBER Alerts for that state. So for Idaho, they have an AMBER Alert coordinator. For the state of South Dakota, for the state of Arizona, everybody has their own team that works with AMBER Alert. And as such, each state has their own criteria for an AMBER Alert. And it's not the same for all the states. Everybody is different, and that's why our education is so important. So when we go into states, we find out the criteria for that state, and then we have to educate the community about it. So we conducted surveys. We conducted a survey for the tribes. We conducted surveys for, let's say, for example, the state of Idaho. We gave them a survey, and in their survey, we talked a little bit more. We asked about, are you familiar with the tribes in your state? Have you had outreach with the tribes in your state? And then for the tribes, we said, have you had outreach with the state coordinator regarding Amber Alert in your community, in your state? What problems do you have with this communication, if any? What equipment do you feel is necessary to make your partnership, to improve your partnership? So this survey was sent out. As I mentioned, there's 574 federally recognized tribes. The best way to do the survey was basically just to call the tribes and say, you know, I have some questions. Would you like to answer these questions? As you know, sometimes we get phone calls and we either don't want to answer surveys, or we don't feel that it's been relevant to us. So of the 574 outreach that we made, we only got 100 answers, 100 responses back. And that's not even half, it's not even a quarter of the total number of tribes. But we did what we had to do, and we used the data that we had, and we submitted this to Congress. That was a part of our report. We had to do a report to Congress before we started our education programs. So we gathered our data and we submitted this report. Okay, kind of skip. Here we go. So the report to Congress talked about, as I mentioned, the education and training needs, the equipment or technological challenges. And in fact, what we're talking about, what happened with Ashlynne's case, is the readiness. Are tribes prepared, and what do they have planned in case a child goes missing or is abducted from the community? And that seems to be the biggest pitfall for the Navajo Nation when Ashlynne was abducted. And if you recall from Pamela's story, she put an alert, I guess you could say, or she did a notice on Facebook, on social media, because nobody at that time had done an alert. And for the Navajo Nation in Shiprock, the tribe was dealing with the state of Arizona, the state of New Mexico, the state of Utah. And each of those three states has an Amber Alert coordinator, has an Amber Alert plan. But what was happening with the community of Shiprock and with the Navajo Nation is that each of the coordinators were saying, well, who's going to do it? Who's going to do the alert? And then they thought, well, it's the FBI that has to do it, because the FBI has handles the major crimes in the tribes. So they waited on the FBI to respond, at which point the FBI came in and said, no, we don't do that. That's part of the state. So being in Indian country, you have to understand there's so many different jurisdictions. There's tribal, there's state, there's federal. And then it came to the question of, well, who's going to do it? Because Navajo Nation encompasses so many different states. And that's just not for Navajo Nation. There's a lot of different tribal communities that extend into more than one state. So this is especially important that these tribes be prepared for this type of event. And that, of course, was the number one number one topic for our report to Congress. Is tribes feel that they could use more training in terms of even just technology to prepare themselves for an event should something happen within their community regarding a missing or abducted child. So this next few slides talk about the survey that I had mentioned previously. So we talked to the Amber Alert coordinators, and they basically were saying, we do have tribes in our community. We had limited access to them. And their responses were basically, and you guys are probably familiar with this, they didn't know who to contact in the tribes if they had a question or if they had a concern. And sometimes tribal leadership changes within the time that they're educated on or given a name. And when they reached out to that specific person or that position, they were no longer there. And, you know, and they want to talk to the person that they need to talk to give them, you know, whatever contact that they have, information, but they didn't know how to do that. And the same goes for the tribes. You know, if we educate one tribal leadership on what's happening in the state, maybe that position is now held by another person, and that information sometimes is not shared to the next person. So, which is why it's so important that community members, teachers, Head Start teachers, school librarians, transportation workers, it's important that everybody is given this knowledge and everybody knows what to do when something happens. When we talk about letting people know what's happened, being prepared, as I mentioned, I'm from the Navajo Nation, and our community, like a lot of cultures, our culture and our community has been raised through this, you know, taboos. And one of the things that our culture kind of frowns upon is talking about bad things. You know, you say you talk about something bad, you're bringing it into the home, and that's not what we want. We really try not to talk about death, but these things happen within our communities. These things happen within our lives, and you know, those are things that we need to kind of put aside and say, you know what, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to say it's going to happen, but we need to be prepared when it happens. And then you can look at the other spectrum of our mentality and our culture and the way we've been raised. You know, we also need to prepare. There are many tribes that start looking, many families that start looking for firewood in the summertime because they're preparing for the winter, you know, the cold months of the winter. That this is the same mentality, this is the same thought process that we need to start looking into. We're not wanting anything bad in our community to happen, but we need to be prepared for it when it does happen. We shouldn't be stumbling and asking, well, who do we call? You know, where's the phone number? Do we wait for the FBI? Do we wait for the BIA? Do we wait for the sheriff's department to come? We should be able to have a plan in place, and everybody knows who to call. And what we need to see and hear about is one plan. What works for the Navajo Nation does not work for everybody in general. You know, it's specific to the landscape of the Navajo Nation. It's specific to the government. So we can't apply Navajo Nation, their solution to the Wind River Reservation or the Oneida tribe community. This is why we say we need to talk to the tribes and talk to the states in each state, and the tribes in each state, and develop a plan and talk to them and find out what their particular needs in the community. We understand that we are all different in how we were raised because of our environment, because of our landscape, because of our kinship stories. And we want everybody to understand that we respect your community, and this is about you empowering your community to meet the needs of your families and needs of your children and your leadership. So on this slide, you can see that these are a few of the things that were outlined from the surveys and things to consider. Because tribes are sovereign nations, we want to show that we respect that power that the tribes have. On that note, if there was some sort of some sort of memorandum of agreement or a memorandum of understanding that needs to be made between your tribe and the responding tribe, we want to address those issues. I know a lot of the tribes don't need that MOU to be signed. For example, the state of Arizona, the tribes here don't need anything signed for the state Amber Alert coordinator to be involved with an alert It's basically just acknowledge that they're going to do that. So I know not all tribes are the same, but these are things that we have to think about, and we say, well, if this is something that you need to do, we will do that. Some of the tribes don't have the technology that others do. Some of them don't have the system, like the NCIC, which, police department, they have the database where they can look to see if anybody has a warrant. And if there's a runaway, they can look into this database. Some tribes don't have that. So we have to meet those needs elsewhere. We have to figure out what they can do and who can help. Some tribes actually are pretty savvy, and they have their own TV stations and they have their own radio stations. These are things that we would bring into our planning as well. If they're there, let's use them. Why not? That just makes the alert go by faster. Our information is shared. And again, from the beginning of 2009, when Amber Alerts were issued all across the United States, the purpose of the Amber Alert was to provide information on a child that went missing. So again, bringing that into Indian country, the purpose of this alert is to advise tribal nations and tribal communities of a child that's gone missing. It's how that information is being disseminated, how it's being shared. It's an alert system. So whatever works for your community, that's what we're trying to help you recognize and implement. Again, going back to Ashlynne's story, it was very unfortunate that it took 13, 14 hours for that alert to be issued. And you think about Pamela's story and her thinking about Ashlynne out there in the desert somewhere, waiting for someone to come see her, probably crying out for her mom and dad. We can't let that happen. We can't let it go by for hours and hours before something is issued. We need to make this, we need to understand what we need to do. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If it's on the TV station, let's put it on the local TV channels. If it's on the local radio station, let's do it on the local radio station. So each of these plans that I'm talking about within your community, it's going to be your own response plan, but it's also going to work with the state plan. So what I'm saying is, you're not going to have just one alert plan. You're going to have more than one alert plan, and they're going to work with the state. Okay, I'm going through. I get so caught up, and I'm going to apologize to everybody. I get so caught up in what I'm talking about that I don't really pay attention to my slides. This virtual platform is difficult for me because I like to see your wonderful faces and I like to engage, and so I apologize. I'm skipping through it because I've already covered this stuff. This particular slide here talks a little bit more about the NCIC system, which we talked about, where runaways are entered into the system, and if there's a warrant, that goes into the system. We went through the challenges already: education, the readiness, the technological issues. Okay, here is the meat and potatoes of our program. We in Amber Alert Indian Country thought about how best to meet the needs of tribes, and it was decided upon that it would be ideal if we were to get all the tribes in one state to sit down and meet the state coordinator for a particular state, whatever state they live in. So the state of Nevada, we would get all of the members in Nevada to sit down, basically have a sit down. We would introduce the state coordinator for Nevada and bring in their team so that they could meet all the tribes and the tribal leaders. And this, I'm sorry, I should go back. This is specifically for the tribal leaders. We wanted to invite them and tell them that we're going to meet the state coordinator, and the state coordinator would come in introduce their team, introduce their education, introduce their training. But it was basically that sit down where everybody shakes hands, everybody exchanges information, and everybody gets the same information at one time on how the state of Nevada would respond to a missing or abducted child. As you know, some states have their own law enforcement. Some states have BIA that come in. Some states, their law enforcement is provided by jurisdictions like the Sheriff's Department or the county. So what we want to do is bring in all these stakeholders, and everybody sits down and everybody talks about what's going to happen when someone goes missing. How are they going to get this information to the state coordinator? How are they going to get this information to a neighboring tribe? How are they going to let people know that a child's gone missing if someone's living in Reno, but they want to talk to the Paiute tribe near Las Vegas? You know, and that would be the ideal situation. Everybody just says, okay, this is what we can do. We can share this. We can share this. We can go, you know, if it's an email, it's an email. But again, that's the ideal situation. When we started making contact with the tribes, we realized this wasn't always going to work, because a lot of tribes can't meet on a particular day. Sometimes, and you guys are probably aware of this, sometimes there's tribes that don't work so well with other tribal nations. And you know, and those are challenges within itself, where, you know, we're familiar with it. I mean, we don't acknowledge it, but we're familiar that there's those challenges. We understand that in our organization. We understand, and we want to be respectful of each of the tribes. So rather than meeting all in one group in one forum, we decided, okay, let's just meet with who we can. If we can get 2 tribes in one room at one time with their tribal leadership, and then bring in the state coordinator, let's do that. So we've actually been successful on that, on that process. So last year is when we started our implementation meetings. We were going to meet with the tribes, and in order to respect the sovereignty and the tribal government, we were extending the invitation to the tribal leaders. And once we made contact with the tribal leaders, we were saying, okay, you can invite who you feel would be important to attend the meeting. If it's your chief of police, if it's your Department of Emergency Manager, Department of Emergency Management, if they're available, or maybe it's the Department of Transportation. Maybe you want the school officials to be there, you know, superintendent. But whoever you feel that you want to invite, please invite them to the meeting. If it's the council themselves, let them come to the meeting. Let's start talking about these things. Let's start talking about, you know, how your current program works, if there is a program. And we've done that with some tribes where the PD has come in and said, we have an alert plan, we have a process, we have protocol on what to do, and you know, and we'll say, okay, that's great. Let's sit down with your protocols and let's see how it would work. So we'd do a scenario. So we'd say, okay, you know, this young man goes missing. He's age 15, from school, doesn't come back. And then we go through and we start looking at if their program, if their plan and their procedures is working for them. And then at some point, sometimes in past meetings, there's a Department of Transportation worker. He chimes in and says, you know, well, we could do this to help your plan. We could roll out one of those road signs and say, you know, a child's gone missing. Can we do that? And I've been saying a Department of Transportation worker a lot, because I feel like they've actually contributed a lot to our meetings. And we didn't see them as a stakeholder initially, but once we started hearing their involvement and their capabilities in terms of their equipment, we say, you know, the more the merrier, bring them in. And they've always had a lot of insight on which roads are heavily populated. And sometimes they know the back roads more than anybody else. And those are things that, you know, we invite to the discussion. Let's talk about what's specific, again, to that community. So in 2009, we first began our state meetings, and this was an outline of who we wanted to reach. So you see here a few states. And the reason why we started with Colorado and Wyoming, and I'm not going to lie to you, is because they only had 2 tribes in their state. And we were going for the smaller tribes so that we could get these meetings, you know, to fit in at one time. So Colorado has 2 federally recognized tribes in their state. We met with them. Wyoming has 2 tribes, and we met with them also. We were on the verge of making connecting dots with Montana, Nebraska, and Idaho, and that was our game plan for this year. And in March, we were supposed to be in Montana for a few events. Of course, COVID-19 happened, so that put everything at a standstill. But I wanted to tell you a little bit more about what we did with Colorado and Wyoming. And if you've seen my presentation before, I apologize, this is the same story I usually tell. But I think it's very personal to what we're doing with the state meetings and with the tribes. So in Colorado, we met with the 2 tribes. And on one meeting, we had leadership, all valued leadership. We talked about, we ran through a scenario because they had their own plan in place. And then there were some pitfalls that we found in their plan. And what happened was, and this is what we want to do with each state. We invite the state coordinator to these meetings. So for Colorado, the state coordinator came with us and met with the tribes. We introduced them. They talked about how once we were gone, they were going to continue to train the tribes about what their Amber Alert plans are for the state. They said they were more than willing, and that's the kind of relationship we want to build. So they came in and they did their presentation. So then we ran through a scenario based on that tribe's plan. And what happened, interestingly enough, is that the state coordinator was talking about how if an Amber Alert comes to them, they're going to start disseminating information to the media, to the local TV news channels, so they could share the information, and to the radio stations. And you guys have probably seen this. You know, we've been there where we've seen that news alert where, you know, an update on the situation. So the state coordinator was telling the tribes that, and we were in southern Colorado at this time. And a community member raised their hand and said, that's wonderful that you're going to reach out to the local news stations in Denver, because that's where their office was, the state coordinator's office. And then this gentleman says, you know, we understand that, but are you aware that we live in southern Colorado and we get the news channels from New Mexico because we border New Mexico? So they were getting Albuquerque, New Mexico news, not Denver news. And so the tribal member says, you know, you can do those alerts in Denver. That's great, because somebody may go to Denver, but we won't hear about it in our community if it's on the news, because we get New Mexico news. And this was news to everybody. It was news to everybody, because, you know, I'm from the Phoenix area. I don't know the news channels that this community gets. And the state coordinator was not aware that this tribal community did not get the main Denver. So then they put in their notes, they said, okay, well, we need to address that. We need to make sure we start making that alert to the New Mexico channels. And the only way they would have found that information out was is through this meeting. Because again, we were going through a scenario, we were running those ideas and making considerations, and at no point in time would that have ever come up, right? So it's that open dialogue that we need to start enforcing in our community and encouraging in our community. Another situation happened with another tribe, and this one a tribal elder was sitting in on, and the tribal elder says, I live on the very edge of our tribal community. I don't get internet. I don't get the radio stations. I don't have any TVs. And she says, and she asked all of us this question. She says, how are you guys going to alert me? How are you going to give me information if something is happening in my community and a child goes missing? She says, I don't get the internet. I don't have telephone service. I don't have cable. And everybody sat there, and I'm not from the community, and I didn't know what to do. And I couldn't answer the question. But what this tribal elder suggested is, she says, when we have a fire in our community, you guys ring that bell. And I know there's a fire, and I'll go to my neighbors, or I'll find out more information because of that bell. She says, could we do something like that? Could we ring a different bell? Could we have a significant pattern for, a missing child, so that I know that something's going on in my community, and I will go make the travel necessary to find out what's happening in my community so that I'm aware. But those are things that I wouldn't have been able to provide or solve, because I don't know the layout of the land. I don't know the trials and tribulations of that environment, but it's the community that does. The community provides the challenges, and it's the community that provides the solutions. But I thought those are the best examples I could give on how we need to start working within our own community and how we need to be more involved. So as you can see, Idaho is on this list. And what we found right now is I'm not traveling to tribes. Tribes have been busy dealing with, and rightfully so, dealing with COVID-19 responses. So what we're doing now is trying to make these meetings virtually, such as today. We're still making contact with the tribes. We're calling to the police chiefs. We're making contact with state coordinators and saying, have you guys heard anything from any of your tribes in your state? We really need to get this education out, but it's difficult not standing in front of all of you and shaking your hand and meeting you and talking to you. And it's, when we meet virtually, it's the same thing. We'd much rather do things in person, but right now in this point in time, we can't do that. So we are extending our meetings virtually, and we're meeting people through our Zoom network. But before COVID, these are some of the tribes that we were able to meet with. One is a community from Colorado, and the other is a community from the Wind River Indian community. So you'll see the gentleman with the on the left-hand side, he's wearing the fluorescent vest. He was from Department of Transportation, DOT. And he was the one that said, we have those signs we could bring out to the road. If you look on the right side of the picture, we have our state coordinators. They're standing in the background. But in the front, the gentleman wearing the suit, he's actually a commander for the Wyoming State Patrol. He's in charge of the state coordinators, the Amber Alert coordinators for Wyoming. He actually came out to our meeting and met the tribal leaders and the tribal council and a few of the community members that were present. There's also a neighboring jurisdiction, the sheriff's office, that sat in on the meeting. They're the two individuals in the maroon shirt. One's a dispatcher and one was I think he's the emergency management director. But these are people, and I wanted to show these photos so you could see it's not just tribal leadership or PD or fire in these meetings, it's community members, it's other departments who all feel that, they need to be aware. So we've had Head Start teachers in our meetings. We've had, like I said, there was a tribal elder in our meeting. She's the one who mentioned the alert system through the bell. But again, when we reach out to tribes, we tell them, if you could give us some time, let's start talking about this. This is what we can do for you. So when we sat down in these meetings, like I said, we did a scenario, and then we actually went through their policies and procedures, and we read through it, and we said, okay, what if we start doing this? Can you, we offer suggestions. But the main premise, again, is to start educating the tribes on what they're going to do when that alert, that phone call comes in and says, my child hasn't come home from school, or someone just, unfortunately took my child from the bus stop. What's the first response? How does that, the grandma and grandpa, who do they call first to get this information out there? Some things that we were able to do before COVID is attend a few conferences. So we went to a Gathering of Nations in New Mexico. We went to a unity conference so we could talk to the youth. And again, we're very adamant on making our information available to everybody, not just leadership, but to the community. So we were happy to engage with the tribal youth at the National Unity Conference. We have done a few community events for the senior citizens of our particular tribe. So we're trying to engage everybody, and this is where we need your help. I am so glad that we were able to sit down and meet with Ty and Amy on this program and this platform. We wanted to share Pamela's story about what happened with Ashlynne, what her family is continually to endure. And we wanted to share that this is now in place. This is a law. This is because of Ashlynne. And like Pamela has said before, you know, she's going to continue to make this fight for other tribal children, because everybody deserves to be protected, and our tribal children and our families are no different. Our funding comes from a grant. So everything we provide is free. If we were to come to your tribal community, you don't pay anything at all. We take care of our travel, we take care of our lodging, we take care of our everything. All we ask of your community is providing us a place to train, to teach, and providing the audience. That's all we ask of you guys. And, you know, and personally, I wouldn't mind, like, you know, some traditional food for lunch. If you're willing to feed me, please do, because I love to eat. So those are some things that we do. Everything's free. Our training, if you look at the website here, you'll learn more about our initiatives. But other than the Amber Alert Indian Country Initiative and the meetings, we also have a lot of different programs available for free training for your community, for your police department on how to recover missing and abducted children. We even have what is it called? The sex trafficking Indian country. A lot of the stuff is Indian country based, because we understand that, again, what works for Dallas will not work for the Ponca tribe. You know, we need to make those cultural considerations for your community. You know, we talk with each other on a different level. We have different respecting, you know, we respect animals, we respect our elders. Even the way, you know, I've been in law enforcement, 17 years I worked in Indian country, and I worked with crimes against children. So when we would do interviews, I would always schedule a lot of time for interviews, because what I know from my family and what I know from my experience in Indian country is, if I'm going to talk to a victim or a witness, it's not going to happen immediately, the information that I get. You know, everything starts, there's a beginning and there's an end, because we're storytellers, right? We like to start, and everything is circular almost, you know, it's not linear. So if there's a fight and a mom says, my daughters are fighting, you know, I'm not going to say, okay, well, tell me what happened tonight. Grandma's going to start from the beginning, when a new boyfriend came into the house or a new girlfriend came into the house, you know, 6 months prior. And I'm going to be patient. I have to be patient. I have to hear that story from that person's beginning and all the way to the end. And this is what I mean. Like, there's cultural considerations that we need to make when we're dealing with Indian country, and we understand that, and we encourage that our learning processes be not pushed upon or not rushed. So again, this is all meeting the needs of Indian country. We most of our staff in Indian country is of Indigenous descent, so we are happy to come visit you in your area. If you go on our website, you'll see a few more tools and forms, you know, stuff you could print out for your children to start talking about how to keep them safe. there's so much we could do for your community. And early on, Ty talked about what are the programs that we need to start developing for our tribes. Now, this is just the beginning. This is just the foundation on how to protect your children. Use us. We're a tool. Now, everything, again, I said is a grant for children, protecting children, but the education we give you and the tools that we give you are for children, but you could definitely tweak all the programs and all the training to make it the need for a vulnerable adult that's gone missing in your community. You could start making alerts for these adults or someone that's gone missing. I just wanted to differentiate. Our program is for children only. Everything's free for children only in terms of, you know, education and resources. But when we give you this education, take it and tweak it and make it fit your needs that you have for your community. I hope you understand. I'm trying to stress that, you know, just use us, please. And we can't come to your community unless we're asked, which is why I am preaching. Please call me, reach out to us on our website. We have a online submittal form if you need more information. But all of this came to our awareness because of what happened with Ashlynne, and we don't want that to happen again. It should not have to have been that way for Ashlynne from the beginning. Ashlynne should be here with Pamela and with Ian. We don't need to wait until something bad to happen before we start thinking about our community, right? Let's stand up and let's start saying, you know, we're gonna learn, make the commitment to learn about how do you respond when someone attacks your community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyesha, for that presentation. That was incredible knowledge, things that I didn't know, things that I feel like would be useful in all of our communities. I'm really blown away by how much breadth and depth there is to our work in addressing violence in our communities, especially as it relates to children. Tyesha mentioned something that I'd really love to underscore, that working in Indian communities, with Native families is different. It'll feel different. The data you think that you're trying to go for isn't going to be data that you can get off an assessment. Grandma's stories is the data, you know, like the stories that you hear from other children in the household is also the data. So really broaden your vision and your perspective of how best to serve, how best to acquire information. Remember to avoid being extractive. I think that the tools that Tyesha could bring to your communities is invaluable, especially if it's something that can be duplicated or replicated to apply across demographics, including age. So how are we protecting our senior citizens? The Urban Indian Health Institute report out of 2016 said that our oldest woman who had gone missing was 86 years old, and our youngest was an 18-month-old baby. So there is no rhyme or reason to why our relatives, why our sisters and grandmas and aunties are being abducted from our communities. But it's important that we have these tools, that we're building community-focused solutions, that we are really digging deep into, you know, what our cultural knowledge already is in addressing some of these situations. So Tyesha, I don't know if you're still with us, but we did have a comment. I don't know if you want to reflect or not. Just as a reminder, please continue to ask your questions. We have a few minutes to address those. We have an attendee who says their frustration is the tribal government does not always advocate for the people who may not be the government's priority. The infrastructure and the thoughts are ancient, and there's so many challenges. So, I mean, I don't know what have been the solutions when you've come up against, you know, dissent or disagreements within tribal communities?
We actually tried to engage the community more. Can you hear me? Because I turned off the phone. I went back to my computer.
Yes.
Okay. And what we try to tell community leaders is that, one of the challenges initially was the state coordinators did not know who to reach out to the community, because leadership changes. So the groundwork really needs to begin with the pillars of the community, with the youth and the elders. So we need to incorporate them with the education, and they need to understand what programs are available, or even the plan itself. So as you mentioned, sometimes the tribal government doesn't meet the needs, but this is where we need to start asking the community itself, the youth and the elders, what would work best? What do you think? So we encourage that dialogue. I mean, we can't enforce it, but we encourage, and which is why we've been trying to reach out to Unity, for example. We're asking the kids themselves, do you know what would happen if you go missing? Maybe you should ask
you just broke up for that last segment of your comment.
Okay.
From you.
We were just, asking the kids themselves, do you know what's in plan if you go missing? Does your family know what to do? Do you know because sometimes kids go missing and they report to their friends, right? They report what's going on. So these youth know what's happening. So we need to engage them as well. And if it's through reaching youth councils, which some tribes have, maybe that's a on how to deviate from the tribal leaders and their game plan.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's something that I advocate for quite a bit, not just as an employee at the Idaho Coalition, but just as a community member in general, that our government systems are in fact facets of colonization, right? Like many of our tribal governments are just a microcosm of what we see at the federal level, which means it's just going to be as problematic when it comes to bureaucracy, when it comes to change in leadership, when it comes to shifts and priorities. So the comment that we received is exactly in alignment with the fact that we are going up against settler colonial systems of government versus relying heavily on what we know as cultural knowledge, what we know as community accountability, and storytelling as healing in our communities. So thank you for saying that. I really encourage you all, if you're working in proximity to Native communities, are you engaging the youth circles, the youth programs, the elder circles? We have senior citizen programs. There is a wealth of knowledge that's embedded in both of those things. So please consider working outside of what you would understand as a governmental system. Our sovereignty exists in the tribe, not in these governing bodies. So when I say that, like individuals, I am a citizen of the Nimipu Nation, I also carry the sovereignty of our people. So those are really broadening our scope of the way that we approach interacting with our communities. And I feel like that's step one for prevention. How loud is the voice of the community in the conversation, in the prevention mechanisms, in response mechanisms? So certainly I hope that's something that you all take away from today. I don't see any other questions coming through. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I know that we decolonize time. Sometimes we go right up next to 2, 1 o'clock. While I'm waiting for some questions to come through, I just want to express deep gratitude again to Tyesha, to Chelsea, and to Pam for joining us today for this discussion on the Amber Alert in Indian Country. You now should have several tools and resources for prevention and response. You have heard a very sobering story about how this can impact our families in Indigenous communities, and we are certainly grateful that you were able to join us today and be part of the conference. For those of you who are not familiar, in Indian Country, we give each other bundles to express our affection and our appreciation and our love. And so the coalition will be sending bundles to Tyesha and to Pam today. to show gratitude. Generally, these things are done in person, and it's a gifted kind of tiny ceremony as part of the event. We've done it for all of our Indigenous presenters up to this point, but it's really interesting. In the time of Corona, we really have to adjust our cultural practices. So I hope that you receive our gifts in a good way and know that we are deeply grateful and have a lot of gratitude that you were able to join us. Just as a reminder, tomorrow is the law enforcement panel. It's got some ominousness attached to it. We've put together several questions that we can moderate through the 5 agencies that will be represented. That's the Coeur d'Alene Tribal Chief of Police, the Nez Perce Tribe Chief of Police, Idaho State Police are represented with their Missing Persons Clearinghouse Director, the City of Boise Police Department, a member of their violent crime detective, I believe is his title. And then we also have a representative from the Federal Bureau of Investigation who at one point was a field agent in Southeast Idaho and can speak to kind of the complicated web of jurisdiction that exists between all of those agencies. So please join us tomorrow. Please open that conversation up to your networks and to your community. Let the community know that this is a conversation that's taking place. I feel like we don't have enough opportunity to have all of these agencies in one spot to position and posit some of these questions to. So please let the community know, share it on Facebook. The link is available, the live Zoom link is available in our conference program at engagingvoices.org. So please continue to use that live link agenda. Please feel free to share with folks that this event is taking place tomorrow. And as always, keep an eye out for your weekly emails with the evaluation. Your feedback up to this point has been very useful. It will help to improve the way that we deliver this material to you in coming years. And we hope that we keep this work going as long as we need to address this particular issue in our community. I'm happy to take your questions via email. My name is on all of the marketing, I think. You certainly can find out more at engagingvoices.org. And if there's nothing else for this afternoon, thank you so much for joining us. I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow starts at noon Mountain Time, which is different from the rest of the schedule. So it's 11 a.m. Pacific Time, noon Mountain Time, where we'll start the LEO panel. Again, deep gratitude, Hamakas Katsiao for you joining us today. That is all. Thank you.